In the second half of 2016, a small team of developers at PopCap Vancouver were gearing up for a presentation that would determine the future of their team, their project, and a beloved franchise, Plants vs. Zombies. For the past year, they had been working on a brand new Plants vs. Zombies adventure that would take the series in a very different direction. It was called Project Hot Tub, in a humorous but vague reference to 2010 film Hot Tub Time Machine, and it was to be an action-adventure game with the open corridor progression of an Uncharted, the combat of something like Batman Arkham Knight, but the family-friendly vibes of a Ratchet & Clank. I spoke to multiple sources familiar with Project Hot Tub's development for this story, and learned that it was internally planned for a late 2017 release. As we know now, it never materialized. But it's not necessarily because the project was in trouble. In fact, everything we know about Project Hot Tub indicates that its ideas, development, and progression were going strong right up until its cancellation. It hadn't run into any major budget issues, deadline misses, scope problems, or other obvious roadblocks that indicated it was in trouble. But sometimes, even promising projects are dropped for unexpected reasons. And in Project Hot Tub's case, it was shut down to extend more resources to Visceral's Star Wars project, which was itself canceled not long after. Project Hot Tub was a passion project made by a group of people who loved the Plants vs. Zombies franchise and wanted to use its world to tell an emotional, resonant story about family and friendship. Their work on Project Hot Tub and the team's subsequent dissolution is a fascinating example of how any number of interesting game projects get canceled before the public ever hears about them, and often not for the reasons we expect. Development on Project Hot Tub started around 2015, with EA offering a small group of developers the chance to try and incubate something new for the Plants vs. Zombies franchise. The group was made of around 30 or so individuals, largely very experienced in EA's Frostbite engine. Many of them loved the Plants vs. Zombies franchise and wanted to take it to the next level after the success of Garden Warfare. What they came up with was Project Hot Tub, a story-driven action-adventure game that focused on a teenage boy named Eddie and his bond with one of the iconic Plants vs. Zombies plants, Pea Shooter. Project Hot Tub's story would have followed Eddie and his sister Tessa on a summer trip to the familiar Plants vs. Zombies locale of Neighborville, where a zombie invasion quickly ruins their vacation plans. After Eddie befriends a friendly Pea Shooter, the two set off across town to defeat the invasion leader, Zomboss, only to be caught up in a nefarious time-traveling plot that flings Tessa and a number of Neighborville's landmarks back in time. The bulk of the adventure would have followed Eddie and Pea Shooter as they chased the zombies through different eras, fought them off in each period, and restored Neighborville to its former glory. Pea Shooter and Eddie's growing friendship served as an important core of Project Hot Tub's story. The two bond as they adventure together, moving and fighting as a team in ways neither could on their own. When Eddie jumps off a high ledge, for instance, he can hang on to Pea Shooter's leaves and use them as a glider. In combat, Pea Shooter's short-range firing abilities combine with Eddie's movement to let him pull off damaging combos against attacking zombies. Pea Shooter isn't Eddie's only partner either. In this vertical slice of gameplay, you can see Eddie swapping between Pea Shooter, a sunflower companion that can light up dark spaces, and a chomper he encounters that functions as a slower, heavier melee attacker in combat, as well as something like a grappling hook to cross over large gaps. He was also planned to team up with a bok choy plant later in the game. While Eddie was Project Hot Tub's main protagonist, he wasn't the only playable character. Critical to Project Hot Tub's story was a plot centered around his familial bond with Tessa, which would strengthen as the two moved outside of their comfort zones and grew up over the course of the story. Tessa was also playable, albeit for a smaller section of the game than Eddie. Partnered with the time-rewinding plant Time, she was the star of a few smaller sections of Project Hot Tub, though her role wasn't quite as fleshed out as Eddie's by the time the work on the game stopped. Eddie and his crew would fight off the zombies of Neighborville and time travel to the Wild West, a pirate island, and the distant future, while Tessa would take the lead in a segment of the game set in the Dark Ages, as well as a handful of other sections. Project Hot Tub's development came at a significant crossroads for the Plants vs. Zombies series. After its initial success as a tower defense game in 2009 and subsequent 2013 sequel, 2014's Garden Warfare had taken the series in a new direction with the addition of third-person shooter gameplay. The genre shift was received well, but it didn't change the overall public perception that Plants vs. Zombies was fundamentally a series for kids. It was fun, sure, and quite popular, but it wasn't exactly making waves for narrative depth and emotion, and didn't really fit in with the rest of EA's portfolio, which at the time included Titanfall 2, Battlefield 1, The Sims 4, and the usual annual sports lineup. While some games remain kid-focused to great success, Project Hot Tub's team envisioned its existing audience not as a limitation, but an opportunity for further growth. What if they could create something that embraced the childish silliness Plants vs. Zombies already possessed, while simultaneously giving its world emotion, narrative, and depth? What if they could make a Plants vs. Zombies game that wasn't for kids, but for the whole family? With a vertical slice, a development plan, and a lot of hope, by late 2016, Project Hot Tub was ready to be shown off to EA executives. But what the team didn't know going into that presentation was that their project's fate would ultimately be determined not by what they said to EA, but by the needs of a completely different team and project elsewhere in the company. A few representatives of the Project Hot Tub team were sent with all the aforementioned materials to the company's Redwood headquarters, bringing their work before CEO Andrew Wilson, Assassin's Creed co-creator Jade Raymond, who headed up Project Hot Tub's segment of EA at the time, and a few others. They had prepared the presentation for some time in advance with their colleagues, knowing they had to prove they could actually make the unusual narrative adventure they were pitching. Despite their lofty goals, the Project Hot Tub team felt confident that what they had made was good, convincing, and interesting enough for their ambitious project to proceed. The presentation took place. The rest of the team heard from their representatives in Redwood that it had been received very well. Nevertheless, they were told within the following days that Project Hot Tub was being shut down, and the team was being moved onto a much bigger project that EA executives had determined needed their skills more: Visceral's Star Wars.
EA has some really exciting plans in the works for the Star Wars portfolio, and what we're doing is bringing in talent from across the industry and letting them loose.
Visceral's project was itself canceled a year later, and the former members of Project Hot Tub were scattered across the publisher's numerous internal studios. The Plants vs. Zombies franchise has since continued without Project Hot Tub, seeing 2 more Garden Warfare shooters, a collectible card game, and a tower defense sequel in 2019's Plants vs. Zombies 3, which is still in a beta test limbo. Notably, there has been no return to an adventure title. While game projects can be canceled for any number of reasons — budget, scope, technology, financial risk, and so forth — Project Hot Tub was seemingly shut down not because any specific element of its pitch or work up to that point was unsatisfactory, at least according to feedback the team received. In this case, it was simply a matter of decision makers opting to allocate resources elsewhere. In fact, it's likely a situation that happens fairly frequently across many AAA studios. Projects get set aside in favor of ones that more urgently require resources, teams get scattered, and hundreds of game ideas, good, bad, and in between, never get to the point of being publicly announced, let alone released. Today, we can only imagine what might have been, and wonder if the Plants vs. Zombies franchise will ever be ready to take such an ambitious new direction again in the future.